Welcome to the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and the countless others that have lost their lives as a direct result of psychiatric harms. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit more specific than usual and kind of unique, to be honest. And in particular, it's something that people don't really talk about in the harm community. I think it has a lot to do with people being self-conscious, self-aware, or maybe it's just a topic that's not as important as our injury, or not as important as some of the other things going on, or something we just don't think about when we're in a difficult place where things are hard enough. We just don't want to do any extra thinking. But I do feel strongly that people in the community should have access to the information. They should feel empowered to speak their minds and be as honest as they want without feeling like they're going to have any blowback or repercussions that would change their life in like a significant way. Getting feedback from other people and exchanging ideas and giving feedback about our ideas to each other is just really critically important part of what happens in the community. But what is not cool is threatening other people, making them feel uncomfortable on purpose. There's this line that gets crossed really, really often because a lot of us are emotional, a lot of us are dealing with really significant trauma. And I get that, I really, really do. But it's a volatile environment. Tempers flare, things go wrong quite often, and we end up hurting each other. It's a really sad occurrence, right? But the reality is that it happens. In the real world, outside of the internet, our relationships can go wrong, and there's a certain amount of danger there as well. And I think a lot of us don't really think about that. We just think about caring for others or sharing information that could help others. We're not really thinking about our own physical security. We're not thinking about our internet security. We're not thinking about how we can be safe. But really what we've all come to learn in life is that there's this baseline awareness that we should have, right? When I go into a doctor's office and he's going to prescribe me a medication, I need to know what I'm doing before I take that medication. I need to understand what the potential harms are of that medication, what the potential benefits are. Is it what I'm looking for? What are the unspoken consequences or side effects of a medication or a treatment? These are all things we know now that are absolutely critical to everything we do. Well, this isn't just about medicine. Every part of our life should get the same consideration and thought, whether that's when we step out the door to go somewhere, or when we're in a relationship. Maybe it's we're dating, or maybe we're married, or we have kids and we're talking to our kids. We invite people over to our house. All this kind of stuff has potential for awesome things to happen, has potential for extremely negative things to happen in every relationship. And the less we think through things and the less we're aware of the potentials of either one, the more we open ourselves up to something bad happening. And then what's even worse is that when something bad happens, oftentimes it's made worse by being unprepared for a consequence, and then we make it worse, or someone else has the opportunity to make it worse and they decide to exercise their ability to make something worse. I mean, I've seen all these things in my life, well more than just a few times. A lot of the stuff I see regularly, and sometimes I'm surprised, sometimes I'm not. But the best reactions that I have are when I'm not surprised by this stuff. So with that being said, I'll get more specific here. A friend of mine recently was talking about how a friend of hers had gone online, I think on Yelp, and given feedback to a doctor that had harmed her. Well, that doctor sued her for probably, I'm guessing, being honest about what happened. I'm sure it came under libel. And so civilly, we're liable for the written words that we share with the community or share in public against anyone else, right? So it's not a criminal offense, so you can't go to jail for saying something that's someone else would deem untrue or inflammatory or damaging to their practice or their business, right? That's when we have a monetary loss that can take place. Can't go to jail for that, but you can be held civilly liable. So say this doctor sued this person for saying the truth, right? And all he had to do in court, civil court's different than criminal court. In criminal court, you have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that you did something, and then you're found guilty. In civil court, you're just half of the jury has to believe that you did something if you're being sued. So if people think reasonably you did it, not beyond a reasonable doubt, there's a difference, that you did something. Say you were harmed, right? And the doctor says there's no evidence they were harmed. Say it was a psychiatric harm or emotional kind of neurological damage that are extremely hard to prove, right? That doctor, if you have money for the doctor to take, he can have the court make a judgment against you, and then he'll be entitled to those funds, right? And there's a lot that goes along with that. And this is really, really scary. It's really, really frightening for a lot of people. And I understand that entirely, because I've had the same things. I've thought twice before being honest with people in public, because not as if I would be dishonest as an alternative, but whether I would just keep my mouth shut. Because when you agitate people, there's a lot of things they can do to make your life harder. And no one wants that, especially those of us that are in a compromised state in any way. We're extremely sensitive to this. I'm extremely sensitive to this. If I have, a sheriff at my door, or taking a report to get my side of a story, or I'm getting subpoenaed to go to court for legal action against me, this could potentially crippling stuff that comes on the wrong day. And some folks are a lot worse off than I am. So my goal is to equip people and empower people to speak the truth in a safe and comfortable way, without any fear of reprisals, without any fear of lashback against them. And a lot of this is unfair, right? Doctors and lawyers can use the law to their advantage and still do things that are wrong, right? Illegal judgments are made all the time, right? That's what appeals courts are for. But this can take 7 years, 10 years, or longer to go through all this legal rubbish to get to the truth. So we don't want to go through that. So it creates a lot of hassle in the meantime that is potentially exceptionally dangerous for us. Unfortunately, a lot of laws aren't helpful in terms of like punitive damage, emotional damages. For some claims, those are reasonable, right? Like a medical harm or a defective device, right? Those costs are regularly tied in. But some other costs, like say you're disabled and you're discriminated against in the workplace and you're fired. This is traumatic, right? There's a lot of harms that happen to you besides just losing your wages. Well, there's notorious precedent in U.S. courts that in disability cases of that nature, like they don't care about punitive damages, right? No judge is going to make a judgment for punitive damages in those cases. So these are things we kind of consider. These are things that we know about, or if you care to pay attention to it, is things that I've gone through with lawyers trying to do the right thing and have action taken, seek justice, that sort of thing. And they've all, failed rather miserably. So I don't have a lot of faith in the justice system being a place to find justice. Really, it's unfortunately about who can afford to pay a lawyer to do what they want, rather than get a lawyer to be honest and fair and take your case because it needs to be taken, and not because there's a monetary incentive for them. Just real quickly, in injury law, there's a tremendous predisposition for lawyers to cherry pick cases and only take cases they're going to get money on, because they have to win to get money. and then they take a 40% cut of whatever you win. So they take a tremendous amount of the money of your judgment. But if they lose, they get nothing, right? They don't get paid for their time. They don't get paid for a lot of the stuff that they do. And that's how kind of the justice system is deemed that it's fair. And that does provide a certain amount of fairness, right? Your lawyer needs to be invested in the success of your case. But how that doesn't work for someone that's injured is that if a lawyer doesn't think they're going to win your case, they're not taking it. There are some lawyers out there that are really kind of hungry they need work, so they will take your case. And if they apply themselves, they'll win, right? If you are honestly hurt by something, you're going to win your case, right? The evidence is there. A jury will believe you, as long as it's executed in the right way. There's bad lawyers out there too, or lawyers that just don't understand or don't have the ability intellectually to apply themselves effectively in law, and that might not work out. But anyone who understands the law and medicine, how people get injured, not particularly difficult, but some of it's really nuanced, like in the case of our neurological injuries. The case can be won. There's enough evidence there. There's enough experts out there. There's enough of everything out there to get the cases won. So it's sad that this is the state, but this is it. I've digressed a little bit, but what this podcast is going to be about is providing a sense of security, a sense of empowerment for people that want to speak out in any setting. And I'm going to kind of give you the tools to go about that in a way that'll give you that'll give you peace of mind. I think a big thing is online, and a part of our condition is that we don't have a lot of peace of mind. Right? We say things online, we don't know the repercussions, what the repercussions might be for what we say or what we do, and then we don't know how it'll come back on us. There's this big thing about doxing in the community, and what that is if you don't know what doxing is, it's when someone gets all your personal details, your address, your phone number, all this kind of stuff. Basically, the way it's for people to contact you directly, and they put it all out there online. So if you're on Facebook or you're a quasi-anonymous platform like Twitter, Facebook, you don't have to put your personal details out there. People will post that online in different places, so anyone that wants it, they can go and grab it readily. They can call you, they can come to your house, they can send things to your house, they can threaten you if they want to, all that kinds of stuff. And really make life feel less certain for you or less safe. I think that stuff is just total rubbish. I can't believe people really do it. Everyone should have privacy, right? Everyone should have a safe space that they can go to, and your home is, you no longer feel safe there. Well, one, it's a giant failure of the community, right? Because ultimately a lot of law enforcement agencies and neighborhoods and stuff, they don't feel comfortable or apt or even willing to keep the people in their communities safe, regardless of what's around and about. Lots of law enforcement agencies are overworked. If you live in a small rural town, you may have a certain amount of safety there, or you may be able to rely on law enforcement to actually be effective. A lot of us don't have the money for private security, like government officials or other people who have the benefit of doing horrible things to others and then feeling perfectly safe afterwards because they have security details or a private security firm making sure they're safe. It's another really big problem in my mind. If someone can purchase safety and compromise the safety of others who can't afford it, right? We have this monetary inequity here, or inequality that shouldn't really exist. Anyone that does anything, they should be open to just as much blowback as anybody else, and if that includes, physical danger or people coming to harm you, right? Really, everyone should have to face that fear equally. I don't think anyone should be entitled to safety from it, but we do see that nowadays. So there's doxing, there's exploitation, right? Like people can get your personal information or other personal details. They could, depending on how lazy you are, or how, I don't even say lazy, how blissfully unaware you are of your details online. People can hack your email, put your emails out there. There's lots of other personal information people can exploit and post online that could make you feel uncomfortable. Fear of litigation, fear of negligent litigation or dishonest litigation is out there. People are afraid that pharma is going to come after them, right? Like that's a really big fear. I've seen one gal passed away, and I don't know the circumstances of her death, but she was an anti-vaxxer. I don't know if she had vaccine injury herself, or I think she had been an insider in pharma, and she passed away. And a lot of people claimed that pharma had a hand in her death, which I have yet to see that proven anywhere. Of course, I haven't looked into it either, which makes me uneducated. I know some others that I've spoken to about it who are bigger names in speaking out against pharma. They've said they don't have any fear, concern, or worry about retaliation, like pharma actually hurting someone. To me, it seems like a bit of a stretch. It doesn't mean that's true or not. It's just the evidence that I have. But people are really afraid of it, and I understand that. It was a fear I had initially, but then after some time in research, I relieved myself of those concerns based on what I found and in my own position. So I understand that fear, but I don't think people should have it. I don't think, and it's not because the fear is unreasonable, right? It's because people should be doing things to protect themselves and their identity online if they're going to speak out against pharma or whatever. And again, speak out honestly. They should not have any concern about pharma being able to find them and come and do something unlawful to hurt them, or even something lawfully negligent like a frivolous lawsuit. They shouldn't be afraid of that. So I think there's a lot around this, right? I've had a lot of friends who've been harassed online, who have been in bad relationships, and then are suffering the ill effects of psychiatry, and the people in those relationships would, emotionally and mentally abuse them, severely by harassing them online and doing all these things when they're already, in severe psychiatric harm, injury, and recovery, and when someone is in recovery from psychiatric injury, I mean, to me, it's murderous to try to agitate them and harm them emotionally on purpose when we already know they're barely able to survive as it is, and that emotional agitations could prove potentially fatal for them. So online security, online safety is paramount for us. It's absolutely critical. And I want to do my part to make sure that everyone has the tools that they need to keep themselves safe and can exercise a level of control that makes them feel comfortable. And what really bums me out is that a lot of people don't have that. I don't think they know how to handle themselves online. I don't think they know that there's tools available to them to be perfectly safe online and not have any worries about repercussions of, emotionally from people, frivolous lawsuits, all this stuff. But it takes some diligence. You got to think about it. You got to work on it, and you got to know what you're doing. But it's the same as goes for operating a vehicle, right? The same thing goes for cooking for yourself. The same thing goes for exercising. The same thing goes for being in therapy. Like, you have to know what therapy can provide, how it works, what the benefits are, what the downsides are. You got to know what the consequences are for having a bad therapist. You got to know what the benefits are for having a good therapist. So even something that seems like we should be able to put our trust in someone else entirely, we shouldn't do that. It's not appropriate. As human beings, we're meant to be in community. We're meant to take care of each other, but we're also meant to be self-sufficient and take care of ourselves to the best of our ability. And when we can all take care of ourselves to the best of our ability, then that provides enough space where there's a safety net, and we have a really effective way of taking care of others as well. And then also, by way of being self-sufficient, we're very, very effective at taking care of others. What we don't see, right, in the US and in other Western societies is that people aren't good at taking care of themselves. So they're exceptionally bad at taking care of others. Family units, healthcare workers, all kinds of people that are supposed to be taking care of others can't even take care of themselves. They can't take care of their own families. And so whatever abuse and trauma they're stirring up for themselves and others, they're just pushing onto their patients, loved ones, relationships, all that stuff. So my perspective is that, what I'm about to talk to today is just a mirror of how we should look at everything in our lives. We should do it to the best of our ability. We should do it conscientiously. We should be making choices of awareness and not choices of simplicity or complacency where we just make choices because that's what we think we should do, right? That's not a choice. You just doing whatever is best for you every day isn't a choice. A choice is when you understand what's going on, you understand your options, you understand the consequences, and then you make a choice, right? When I make a choice to help someone out, I know it could be hurtful to me. I don't want anything in return, and I just help them out, right? And that's me making a choice to do something that doesn't benefit me, that helps someone else out, right? And it potentially benefits them in the best way that I see possible. So choices don't always have a benefit, right? And nor should they. And most choices I don't think should benefit us. If we're doing the right thing, most times it's not going to benefit us, which means everybody has to be doing something that doesn't benefit them on a large scale for things to go well. And when we do that, we get to places where we don't perpetuate medical harms. We don't perpetuate the myths of psychiatry. When people in our community and families are hurt, we have the ability to help them out in a way that perpetuates health and happiness and good relationships going forward, and doesn't help them out. And then we spend the rest of our lives being like, remember that time I helped you out? Yeah, Jimmy, you're a real loser. Like this kind of stuff is the stuff I was raised with, as if it's acceptable. It's disgusting. It's deplorable. It's horrible. This is why we are where we're at, like on a grand scale. Like the Western mind is like, let me give you something, and just as long as you make sure you pay me back, and you know what, let me get some interest on that too. And you think this translates just to money? No, this is like an emotional thing, right? Like, I remember when I helped you out emotionally, yeah, you owe me for that. You can come over here and help me out with whatever, and then you need to help me out some more because I was the one that helped you out first, right? These are ridiculous Western ideas. I can't tell you, they're completely ingrained in everything. Listen to other people. Just listen to them, like people in your family, others. And you can't blame them entirely because a lot of people are raised with this, but you can hold them accountable for continuing to do it when they have evidence otherwise that they shouldn't be doing it, that is damaging, right? But listen to people talk. People are extremely self-interested. Not only are they self-interested, but they expect more from everybody else than they're willing to give out. It's a really, really weird thing. It can only be perpetuated by a lack of common sense and a lack of philosophy or philosophical understanding that this is a one-way street, right? If everyone's taking all the time, you have a country of people, of millions of people that are taking and not providing. Where do we end up, right? Now, if everyone's giving, right, now you have millions of givers who are providing care, comfort for all the people around them. Now you have a country or a society that has more than enough for everyone, right? Because everyone's providing. Now there's plenty, right? See how simple that is. Like if everyone's taking, no one has enough. If everyone's giving, then the people that can't give, they have more than enough. Dude, you got 10 people around you that are willing to take care of you, right? The load is very light. Many hands make light work. This is, when we think about the future, I'm totally tangenting here and I love it, so I'm going to keep with it. When we think about the future and what we want the future to look like, think about a future where everyone intrinsically wants to give because they're given back in more measure than they can even give themselves by the multiple people around them, right? And then when people fall, when bad things happen, right, everyone's there looking out for them and making sure they're well taken care of because they have to take care of these people around them, or they feel obligated to because they're a good person, right? But they have a bunch of other people helping them out, helping to care for others. And then what are we not doing? We're not smoking, we're not drinking, we're not watching TV, we're not doing stupid crap that just makes us dumber and hurts our health. All right, yeah, I'd love to see statistics on how much self-harm this country does, and overeating, drugs and alcohol, TV watching, right? These things are not beneficial. They provide a temporary release, but they're not beneficial. There's no study out there that says watching TV is gonna help you out. There's no study out there saying smoking is gonna help you out, unless we go way back. Of course, there was fake studies on that, and your doctor would tell you to smoke to improve your life, right? We intrinsically know what's helpful and what's not, what we can live with and what we can't. I've been wondering why we're not making choices to do everything we can on a daily basis to improve everything for everyone. It's really interesting. We go back and look at other civilizations, other societies, like things were entirely different and they went a different way. And historically, we had some pretty rad things going on. In that way, I think the answers to the future are going to lie in the past. There's past civilizations and past peoples that took care of each other and focused on doing good things for themselves and others, and that was the mainstay of what was happening, right? And those civilizations flourished, and likely they were wiped out by colonialism or some other, violent, selfish motivation, right? And this is the power and the weakness of everyone being awesome, right? We have to find a way to preserve it without being destructive, and that's the great, I think, problem that mankind's faced with. But no one's talking about that. We're talking about politics and other rubbish that doesn't matter, right? And then look at where we're headed in the future. Look at how selfish we are. Look at how destructive we are. Look how much we think before we do. Look how much money has to do. These are all selfish motivations. And be philosophical when you're looking around at stuff. Look at what is true and what's not true in a philosophical light, because absolute truth and fallacy are provable things, right? Usually they fall short of that. Not a lot of things you see out there you can be absolutely certain about or absolutely sure it's false, right? But you can discern with a high degree of certainty what's going on. And we look around, we see people being greedy, we see people being murdered and tortured for money. In the medical industry, we see people not caring if that happens or not because they have a good job or they're in a nice, comfortable situation. These are all extremely selfish things. And then ask yourself, what's the net benefit here? What's going to happen down the road? Like, do our answers lie in the future, or can we learn from the past a better way? Because I'm sure a lot of people would say, we're super rad, we got all this technology, we got all this cool stuff, there's all these really great things going on. And that's fine. There are some good things going on. Really great things, I beg to differ. I'm pretty sure I could completely destroy anything people think is rad right now as something completely toxic and horrible. Because everywhere I look around, you're not looking at the cost-benefit ratio correctly. People getting rich off other people gratifying themselves, there's no cost-benefit there. It's just cost. It's costing the people that are doing it, and it's costing the people that are taking the money from the people that aren't benefiting. They think they're getting ahead. They think they're wealthy. They think everything's groovy, but it's not. It's not at all. It's quite the opposite. I'll go and I'll tell a story in this digression, and then I'll move on to the important stuff. But I went to a public school, and I had a certain group of friends, pretty cool cats, but we were rowdy. We got into trouble. I got into my fair share of trouble. Saw my fair share of violence. I saw my fair share of dysfunction, drug and alcohol abuse, emotional, physical abuse between human beings, which took me a while to kind of look back and understand and whatnot. But so I went to public school. It was a nicer public school, but it wasn't. In terms of across the country, if you look at the U.S., it was a horrible school. But for my area, it was one of the nicer schools. So I thought it was public school. Drug use was rampant. Was going on in school, even during class and stuff. Violence, same thing. People were getting stabbed and killed or severely injured, like in and around the school, after school, stuff like that. Just to give you an idea. But something really interesting happened to me. A friend of mine was in one of my classes, a really quiet kid. I think we had a project together or something. We started talking, and he was quiet, but once we started talking, he was a really, really cool kid. He had gotten kicked out of private school, and so it was really interesting. So he's like, hey, you want to come hang out? I'm hanging out with my buddies because all of his friends were in private school still. He was from an not incredibly wealthy family, but a rich family. I want to say there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. But a lot of the people that he hung out with were wealthy. Family money for generations. They lived on manors and estates that were like huge. Really wacky stuff I had no idea about until I met these cats. So he invited me. I was like, all right, let's hang out, let's do it. So I went to a party. I started meeting these kids, and they're super cool, right? And so we started hanging out more and more, and it was really, really interesting. There was a set of kind of cool kids that were actually kind of new money. Their parents worked a lot harder for their money, so they all had a bit of a respect for it. They treated each other really, really well. They were grateful for the money that they had. They took care of each other, and like you'd be hanging out with them, and they would just, they just buy you stuff so that you could participate in whatever was going on. They'd buy you tickets or whatever, wherever they were going. They just invite you. They take you to shows, whatever. It was great, like super solid, like much more cooler than probably the public school kids I was hanging out with. But then there was this different crowd with the private school kids, and they were doing really, really nasty stuff. Like they were stealing from each other. They were threatening each other. They were abusing drugs and alcohol, but in a different way. Like, the kids that I hung out with at public school were just trying to get drunk and party and have a good time, and then they'd get a bit rowdy, right? Sometimes it would be something beyond that, maybe some drama and like some stuff, right? But these private school kids, they would manipulate each other to a level that was just far beyond the crowd that I hung out with at public school. Like they would emotionally just play on every single last heartstring and advantage they could get on someone else. They would threaten people, trap each other, and trick each other and do horrible things to each other. Really often, they would just leverage like even their wealth and their family name, like to try to harm others. And what I found was that these other kids that were doing this stuff, they came from like old wealth. Like their families had been rich or wealthy for a very, very long time, and so they had this wealth passed down. And the kids, like they all were holding money over each other. They're all trying to control each other. I'm trying to think of some of the really bad stuff that they did. But the more I got to know some of these other kids that were doing this nasty stuff, like the more I saw how horrible their parents were. They'd buy them really nice cars and stuff like that. Some of these kids had like 4 or 5 cars. The kids owned the cars, and their parents would take them away. They send them to boarding school. Some of this other stuff like that was just physically and emotionally incredibly brutal. It gave me a really interesting perspective on what money and greed and wealth does to people, especially over the long term. If people have this idea that money is inexorably a good thing for you and you'll execute this perfect wisdom in relationship to it, you're very, very wrong. It's not something that human beings have the capacity to do, with a great exception. And nor historically is it something I think human beings were meant to handle or conditioned to handle. Another subject, but just something I thought I would share, especially in the light of what's going on here. It may not seem particularly relevant, but control comes into play. Like frivolous litigation, people will do everything they can to try to keep other people down, even if they're being honest, even if what they have to say is important. They don't want things getting in the way of their cash flow. They don't want people saying things different than what they're saying. Why is that? It's a good question. It's weird. It's so weird. I didn't even get it, right? Like I'm not on that page, right? I want to hear from other people. I want to learn from other people. I don't know how else you could exist as a human being nowadays. There's a lot of things we have to learn and navigate. So for people to try to stifle others and take advantage of them or control them is far beyond me, but it's happening, especially for people with money and power. They'll leverage those things against us. So today what we're going to talk about is the tools that we can use, kind of methodology and procedures that we can put in place to keep ourselves safe and to give ourselves the control that we deserve. I will give a warning or a heads up on the information that I'm about to give. It's my intention is that it's used for honest and legal purposes. Just like anything else, it can be used otherwise. And I'm not encouraging, endorsing, or condoning that. Absolutely not. It's quite the opposite. The tools that I'm giving are for what I hope is liberation, freedom, honesty, and most importantly, it's to facilitate the critical, absolutely critical change that our society and our communities need in getting the information out that needs to be out about medicalized harms, psychiatric harms, all the things that are going on that someone else is profiting from, that's taking the lives, liberty, and freedom of others. And so my great hope here is that some of the things that I know will give us more leverage and power to do what's right, and will give us more traction to come together as a community and make a more unified, more powerful, more secure voice in leveraging those things and going forward. That being said, let's get this thing moving. So we all have kind of our baseline details. We have who we are, where we live, our phone numbers, our IP address, which is a number that's provided by your internet service provider, your ISP, to the internet. So say you're at home, you're surfing the net, you don't have any security in place, you'll have this MAC address, and that's a very specific long series of numbers and letters that describe the device that you're using, right? Like I might have a laptop and a phone and a computer that all have different MAC addresses. And then there's your IP address. And this is an address that's given to your home by your service provider, and that information is exchanged with the internet when you log into or access any information on the internet, right? So you go to Google, your ISP says, hey, I have an IP user here. This is their information. This is their MAC address and their IP. And this information is often accompanied by compatibility information. So it's saying this user is using Windows 11 and Internet Explorer, and they're trying to gain access to your services, essentially, and your information. So Google then, right, it accommodates that IP MAC address operating system, which would be Windows or Mac or Apple OS, and then the browser type, right? So it has to provide certain information to interface with your internet browser, right, for it to work appropriately, right? If it misreads your browser or your operating system, you'll get an error on your end, right? When the internet window tries to populate, you'll get an error, or the data will come in wrong, fragmented, or wacky jacky. So that's kind of generally how that works. Now, this information is very specific, right? So if someone had a subpoena, say from a court, and said, we have these IP addresses that went onto our Yelp website or went on to Google review and said, this doctor sucks and he's a loser and he's an idiot, right? This is libel, this is slander, it's cost the doctor money. The people who belong to these IP addresses, are going to need to have a judgment placed against them for this doctor to recover his reputation, the financial loss that's taken to his reputation, and maybe his hurt feelings. So the court will then hand down a subpoena, and that can be served on the internet service provider, and the internet service provider will then be obligated by the court to give your name, your address, your phone number, all your contact information, and hopefully not all the places you've been online and all the different things that you've done in accordance with that. Of course, that would be a different court request, right? But it's possible, right? The court can hand down a subpoena to get any information it wants from any entity operating inside its jurisdictions, right? So state court can subpoena any records within the state, and possibly outside of that, depending on different things. A federal court could hand down a judgment to gain access to records and information anywhere in U.S. jurisdiction. And then certain three-letter organizations can exert influence in other countries to gain additional information, right? That could be held in a different country. These things have happened. They can happen. They do happen. So we'll talk about three-letter agencies and other stuff a little bit. Really shouldn't apply to us much, because as long as we're being honest and truthful and we're not violating the law, they really shouldn't be involved in anything. But this gives you an idea of what's going on. So that's kind of a baseline of how things work on the internet. Basically, whenever you're on the internet, you are one step away from having your name, your address, your phone number out there. This is a physical distance, right? So then there's this data distance. So some of us, well, I shouldn't say some of us, all of us, we go online, we fill out web forms that ask for our phone number, our address, our date of birth, our social security number, our names, all this stuff, right? I think we've all done it now. If you're listening to this podcast, you've done it. So when you do that, a private party gets your information. There are certain requirements and laws around how they handle your information. It does not mean in any sense that they will comply with the law, right? Or that it would be known to any entity when they do not comply with the law. So, right, say I have a small business, say we do a lot of business though, right? And a lot of people come through and exchange small pieces of information. Say, you offered an internet service where you did a family search or something. Just an idea of where people from all over might come around and pay you like a small fee, like $5, and get family information from public records, right? And you'd supply them with that, provide some interesting anecdotes about your family. But as a business, small business, right, you need payment information. So you ask for names, addresses, and then for your search criteria, where you're asking for date of birth, you probably want to ask for social security. We really should never give that out, of course, but we do online, usually to government agencies or credit agencies, which credit agencies are also private agencies, so they can do whatever they want with your information as well. But say you're a small business provider, you get this information, right? There's nothing stopping you from accessing your database, pulling all that information out, going to a third party, and selling, millions of names, phone numbers, addresses, date of births, credit card numbers, all this stuff to some third party. They can use it for whatever they want. You can do that totally anonymously. This could be untraceable, and you just get free money, right? It's something that you can do, right? So we have to ask ourselves, if that can be done in an untraceable fashion, are people doing it? Long dramatic pause. Yeah, someone's doing it, you can bet. Some of this isn't new. Some of this is like business as usual, right? I've known this for a while. I grew up around computers as a kid and pretty hip to it. But so back to my kind of original thread. There's this. You're one step away from your physical information being released through your internet service provider, but you're also a certain number of steps from all your information being released or being accessed online. There are private pay groups that people pay a service, right? A fee, right? It's there's public information websites or whatever. I won't give any specific names, but you go there, you pay a service fee, and then also you can just search. It's just a search engine for personal information, right? You go in, you put in a name, you put an address, you put in a phone number, and all the results will come back on there. And then so whatever information you're missing, right? You want someone's phone number, you go in there, you can search their name, a bunch of phone numbers will come up, addresses will come up, social security numbers might come up, records, public records come up, criminal records, financial records, all kinds of stuff comes up, and you can have access to this. A lot of this stuff is public or is held privately and is sold to people as such. The legality here is you wouldn't believe how legal it is for people to exchange information in this way. So here we are. We're sitting in this place where all of our personal information is just one step away from being given to someone else for either a motivation, right? If someone wants to pay money to get your information, they can do that. If someone is legally interested in obtaining your information, they can do that as well and provide really not much, just good cause to a judge, and they can pull your information as well. And so the question becomes, how do you want to handle that situation? You know, what do you want to do? So you're chatting Facebook, you know, and someone doesn't like what you have to say, and you know, your Facebook name is, it's just your name, right? You give your full name on there, and say you have your email in there, you have a few different things, right? It's very easy for this person to find out where you live, what your phone number is, the people that you know, the people in your family, like all kinds of stuff. Like, really, it shouldn't be new to us, but for some of us it might be. And that is the people I'm trying to speak to the most here. I don't want you to feel vulnerable or taken advantage of online, but the first step to getting out of that situation is to feeling vulnerable or stressed or anxious or weak online or exposed online, is to get out of the situation where that's true. Get yourself into a situation that's secure and safe and free from exploitation. So, as you can imagine, you want to put layers in place to protect anything that you want to hold private, anything that you want to be a layer of security for you, right? So, some people, they just have family members on Facebook, so they use their full name on Facebook. Like, I get that, right? I think that's maybe a mistake, because Facebook has all your information. They can give it to anybody they want. They can do whatever they want to it. Their really intimate information is held on Facebook. Where you go, who you talk to, who you're in a relationship with, your different pieces of contact information, your habits, your appearance, your eye color, your body size and shape, your hair color, your ideas. Your ideas are online, and that's a powerful thing too, with the direction that things are going. So all these things are there, and then they're all tied directly to you in that case, right? And some of us are just super straightforward and legit, right? Like, you're online, you're sharing family pictures, you're having a good time, right? So it's fine in some sense. I don't think that's fine. I don't want someone to come and look at my family pictures, or maybe I have a not so appropriate family member that's acting badly online, and they see I'm tied to them, and now they're looking at me to try to find that family member or to get information about that family member. And what you have to remember is that people are clever, right? People can come to you as a friend or as an acquaintance. They can share interests with you. If your interests are all online, someone can get into an interest group or find a way to talk to you, and it's going to seem genuine, it's going to seem legit, and you're going to be like, oh, you like flying drones too? Like, oh, that's rad. Look at the picture that I took. That'd be like this. What about this? What about that? Hey, do you want, let me give you something for free? You know, there's a lot of ways that they can trick us into trusting them, even tricking us into knowing them. There's nothing that's stopping them from impersonating a friend, getting in a friend request, or making contact even, and then getting us to accept their friend request, and then divulging information, location information, relationship information, all kinds of stuff. You got to ask yourself, are you thinking about these kind of things? When you talk to someone online, do you know who that person is? Have you met them? Do you know their physical location? Do you know physically who they are? Right? In some cases, it doesn't matter, right? If you're conversating with someone online and you don't have any personal interest in them, meaning like there's no physical contact, there's no emotional investment, different stuff like that, it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. You're not giving them any personal information. They don't have any leverage on you. You don't have leverage on them. You're just sharing ideas. Great. It's cool. What if that's not the case? What if things evolve? What if things change? What if you've been talking to someone for a very long time, you feel very comfortable with them, and they're not the person that you think they are? Is that a problem? Is that a security concern? Is it dangerous? It's just some things you should think about probably more often than you do. Why do I say that? Because I should probably think about it more often than I do. So all this always comes back to information when we're online. So if you're using your real name or you have specific pieces of information that you can be identified by online, it can come back to you and people can find you. And that often leads to a sense of insecurity, a sense of worry, different things. And I understand that, right? Like we can go back to this case where someone wrote a review online and then the doctor sued them because they made an honest review, right? That all comes back to their information being online. If they made the review with their full name, and he just goes back and looks at his patient list and he's like, okay, this is who it is. So now I can make a court complaint, get a subpoena to get their information, make sure it's all accurate, take them to court, make a judgment against them, and now I get their money, right? That's one risk. There's physical risks, right? Someone's like, I don't like this person, I want to go harm them, right? Now you have a physical risk on your hands. Emotional risk. You got an old boyfriend who wants to know your information so they can pretend to be someone else, get close to you, and then emotionally wreck you because they think it's funny or appropriate or revenge or payback or whatever. These are all different risks each one of us has to assess for ourselves, right? And think about. Now, I think, so outlining the risks, our community has another type of risk that I think can be important that should be spoken about in this space as well. And there's physical risk, right? So a friend of mine who was severely injured by TMS as well, she went to meet a journalist, and I was put in a difficult situation because it happened quickly, and this person was a friend of mine. I know they had no experience with meeting someone, a stranger, in a potentially sensitive situation where you're making serious allegations against someone else, right? So that person could, right, another party could be involved and could be trying to harm you reasonably. Is it likely? No, it's not likely. But these considerations should be made, right? You should always think about what's going on or what could potentially happen before we do anything we haven't done before or are uncertain of. There's a whole laundry list of reasons of why we should think before we act, but we always should, right? And so we meet with people, we communicate with people physically, we call people. There's different set of considerations we should make there as well, and I'm going to cover that because it is relevant. Some of us, I think, in the online harm community, we get into relationships with people and we end up physically meeting them. That's awesome, right? Meeting people in the community and sharing time face to face, I think, is one of the most important and life-changing and awesome things that can take place in the community, right? But I think it should be done safely and thoughtfully. That's my thought. So, I mean, there's tools and there's things we can do to make sure that takes place, and we're not opening ourselves up to significant risk. So I'll talk about that as well. But we'll stick primarily to cyber stuff because I think that's where most of our interactions take place. They're the easiest and best way for us to kind of exchange information and ideas these days, and just to do everything that we do. So let's start with the fundamentals. So you have to think, if you're making a big change right now, or if you're just tweaking things, think about what's appropriate for you and what you should do, right? So right now, if you have, say you're in the worst case scenario, say you have all your personal information online, you use your full name for everything, you use your email address, your phone number, and all stuff like everywhere, you just hand it out like candy, right? You might want to think about changing that and changing the information that you give online. So you might want to think about making a different identity online, or changing your name online so it's not so descriptive. You may want to use your first name and then use something else for your last name that it doesn't match your actual last name. Or you make a fun name, right? There's nothing online that says, hey, you have to give all your information all the time. It's completely ludicrous. Anyone that's passing around those kind of ideas is in very poor taste, and it's reckless and inappropriate. When you're on Facebook, when you're in different groups, you're playing video games, right? You have a handle, right? You have a name that you use that people know you by. It doesn't make you a liar. It just makes you smart, right? Don't put all your personal information out there. Don't even give hints or clues to your personal information. If you want to, you feel comfortable doing that, you can do it. Just think through it first, right? So, as a baseline, if you're creating an identity to use online for whatever, it could be for gaming, it could be for interacting on certain forums, maybe that are a little bit more wild, right? They're talking about wild psychiatric harm, and people get angry and try to hurt each other on there. It's not a foreign concept to a lot of us. Make a different identity, make a name, make a date of birth, and then start. If you think about how much information you need, if you need a different address, if you need a different phone number, you can get all that stuff. So I'll start from that perspective. We'll start from the base and build up and go from there. So the first thing we were talking about was internet service provider, right? And how they track your information and how that goes down. So fundamentally, the computer that you're using sends your information out online. That's a fundamental problem that we have. So in order to, we'll go through this, layer by layer and go through the most fundamental problems. We'll solve them and then move on to the next problem, so that you have layer by layer a foundation that you can absolutely trust. You keep all your information secure, and you can speak honestly. You can do whatever you need to do, exchange any information you need to exchange without any fear of reprisal or legal action against you or anything like that. So the first tool we have is called Tails. It's a Linux-based operating system. I'm going to put a link to all this stuff down in the notes so that you have it. You can just link to it in case you can't make out what I'm saying or whatever. But Tails is it's a Linux operating system, which if you haven't used Linux before, it's it's similar. It's funny to me. It seems as similar to both Mac and Windows, and it's got a mainframe where you just have a background, and you have icons and drop downs and stuff that you interact with your mouse. I think it's really intuitive. I think it's easy to use. That being said, it is different than what we use, so you'd have to get used to using it. But Tails stands for, I actually forget exactly, it's an amnesiac software. So when you boot up Tails, whether it's off a USB or you create a drive that has Tails on it, it erases everything it does on its own, right? So any data that's housed on there is erased after it's used. All the internet history, everything that's done on there it's total amnesiac. So everything, it's constantly fixing and erasing itself. Even the random access memory from your computer, all the things on there, it completely erases that stuff out when you log out, when you shut down, as a part of its processes. So not only is it a clean footprint on whatever hardware you're using, it's a clean online footprint as well, and all that. Obviously, there's a ton of detail that goes into it, but I don't know if it's really relevant. Tails has Tor network integrated into it. And so a Tor network is where, if I understand this right, it's a series of international anonymous servers that are used to conceal the source of your internet address, right? So you log in with the Tor. The Tor is going to connect you through multiple servers internationally that conceal your address and allow you to operate with anonymity and connect you in such a way where it can't be traced back to you. And again, it's amnesiac, right? Like everything's going to be erased after you log out, and there's not going to be any trace that would be identifiable back to you, unless of course you're sharing your information online, right? But the purpose of using a Tails system would be so that you don't put identifying information out there, that you're using either a different identity or just a handle that's not going to point back to you, right? As long as you can keep things clean in the information you're sharing, none of your technical hardware information, your ISP or anything like that, will be relayed back. That being said, if you can, you want to log in through an internet connection that's like not your own. Like if you do the internet cafe or connect through someone else's internet, legally of course, that's going to add an additional layer of security. So depending on how sensitive what you're doing is, right? Say you're sharing sensitive documents, or you're posting something somewhere where someone may react unpleasantly to it, right? But of course, we're being honest and lawful about everything. You could do that through an internet cafe, Starbucks, or whatever. Like, there's absolutely no way it could ever be traced back to you. It's absolutely certain, right? If you do it from your home address, it is possible, but your risk is almost zero. And it's the best it's going to get, put it that way. So there's that. So we have this Tails operating system. In terms of operating systems, so if you want to learn about it, and this is something you take seriously, yeah, I'll have the link down. You can learn about it and kind of go through the process of installing it. Installing a new operating system and doing that yourself, it's a little technical. It can be difficult, but it can definitely be done, depending on the sensitivity level that you're at. I recommend learning about it at least, but you don't necessarily have to go that far with things. It just depends on what you're doing. So there's another operating system I will talk about called Kali. It is free. All Linux stuff is free, basically. So Tails is free. Actually, everything I talk to you about is going to be free. I would never encourage you to pay for something because that's going to leave a footprint, right? Like, giving your payment information is not something you want to be doing. Kali is a set of penetration tools, so it's a hacking platform. There are tools in Kali that can help you preserve or at least identify weaknesses within yourself, right? You can use Kali to test the physical or the virtual security of your own network. There was this tool in there I used before called Metasploit, I think. Basically, you put information into Metasploit and it scrapes information from all the public places in the internet, everywhere it can scrape information on the internet, and it comes back with a report to you saying, like, here's where all this information lies, right? So if you're searching for information on someone else, you can do that. If you search for yourself, you can see if someone has different pieces of your information, you can see exactly what's going to come back for someone that's actively trying to figure your stuff out. There are tools on Kali that could be helpful for you understanding better your own situation. And then also you can understand kind of the capabilities that are out there for hackers, ethical or not. I watched Mr. Robot. If you want to watch a show that is fun to watch and is also accurate and realistic in terms of like what hacking is, cybersecurity, kind of the risks that are out there, I did like Mr. Robot a lot. I did notice that what they were doing on the show was real. And then I looked at the consultants for the show and the way they made the show, and they actually made it in a realistic fashion, like right down to the keystrokes, which I found pretty cool. Most of the hacking stuff you see is just total rubbish. Hacking or security oriented stuff. So I'll leave a link for Kali down there too if you want to look into that. The stuff can be more on the technical side, but I want to equip everyone that hears the podcast that might take an interest in this stuff to be empowered to do it and to not be left out of the loop, to not be at a disadvantage towards the people that either could be working against them or things that could be working for us in any kind of capacity. I'm not going to limit the dream or the vision on that. So those are operating systems that we can use to keep ourselves secure in all kinds of different activities. Anywhere from activism, to just sharing our thoughts online in a safe and secure way. We don't have to worry about it. So there's that. This one may not be particularly relevant, but it is helpful. I'll give two of them out. There's Veracrypt. I'll leave a link down to that as well. Veracrypt is a free encryption service. So it has different forms of encryption on there, different types of encryption. I used it before. It's just an excellent. It gives you different kinds of encryption, but also gives you a lot of different encryption methods. You can create several different kinds of drives that will have like security fail-safes in them, so they'll erase themselves if they need to be erased. They'll create hidden partitions if you're afraid of someone detecting, maybe say documents you're keeping or whatever that you find important you don't want other people to have access to. And then of course it can encrypt drives, it can encrypt segregated containers or different partitions in several different ways. I really found it to be really versatile, and it covered all the different needs that I can think of. So it can encrypt your operating system. It can also encrypt specific drives, thumb drives, partitions within a hard drive, and create hidden partitions with different encryption as well. So certain three-letter agencies fund this software because they need access to free third-party dynamic well-made options as well for the people that work for them, the resources that work for them, and that's how these things really come into existence. They need good funding. So if you're providing a service that agencies or important people need, that they can access anytime, anywhere, that's part of the reasons, part of the ways this stuff comes out. Another one I found helpful in the past was called Recurva, and Recurva is a data retrieval software. So if something gets deleted off a drive or partition or whatever, it can retrieve that deleted information, and it's also free. There's probably other good free ones out there. This is just the one that I used and was successful with. To that end, like, so if you accidentally delete something, like, you can recover, you may be able to reasonably recover it, because when we delete something, we think it's getting deleted. It's not actually getting deleted. What it's getting is it's getting compressed or recoded into a more more effective manner, so that the space is just made available again. So that any process that can be done can be undone in that way. The way to truly delete things is everything is a binary, right? It's all zeros and ones, right? You have to put everything back to zero. Well, that takes a lot more effort than just re-encoding something and compressing it so that it just doesn't take up any space. When you format something, when you change it all back to zeros, then that's a different process. It's a much longer process and and it takes a lot more energy and effort for a computer to do that. So Recurva looks at that methodology and it undoes that methodology and brings files back. So that brings up an interesting question, right? So if you want something to be truly deleted, what do? There's a few methods for doing that. You can format something. If you format something 7 times, it should all be back to complete zeros, because I don't know. That was just what I heard. That was there's just certain criterias, like for the government getting rid of data, private companies getting rid of data. There's a certain standard they have, because there's anomalies that pop up through all this stuff that can be exploited. So if you format something several times, each time you format it, it's going to be better and better up to 7 times. The other thing you can do is reuse the data, right? So if you have say a thumb drive, you format it, or you delete everything off there, you format it, you fill it back up with data again, it'll reconfigure all that data. So whatever you deleted in the past will be reconfigured, and then you format it again. It's just going to scramble the data so hard that there's no way anyone's going to be able to salvage stuff off there. It's all going to be messy. But it just depends on how motivated the people are that you think might be trying to get your stuff would be. So obviously, if it was, say you had information that was, say you were an expert witness, right, and you were dealing with information that was subpoenaed from pharma, say some of their sensitive records, right, you need to format that 7 times to get it off, so you wouldn't be criminally liable for contempt or something like that, screwing with courtroom stuff. If it's just old pictures or just data from an old hard drive you want to get rid of, right? Just format it, put new data on it, and then format it again. Or, you could take a magnet to it if you're going to throw it away, put it in your microwave, do something crazy like that. That'll do the trick as well. If you didn't know, magnets change the ones and zeros. So if you put a really strong magnet up to a hard drive, it'll wipe it. It'll throw it all back to zeros. So there's a physical kind of danger as well with the SSDs, the new solid state hard drives. I don't believe they can be affected in that manner. They're more secure. So depends on the drive that you have as well. But generally, there's always a physical way to destroy the data as well. But just be certain if you're doing something sensitive, just be certain with what you're doing and make sure you know what you're doing. Ask yourself the questions like, how sensitive is this? How important is it done efficiently? What's the cost if it's not done the right way? And then you can exert an equilateral or an appropriate amount of effort to make sure you do whatever you need to do, right? Personal data, right? If you have a file with like your social security number on it, your past addresses, your phone numbers, stuff like that, if you actually keep that in a digital form, you better make sure that stuff is completely destroyed before you throw it away. If you have an old computer or laptop or something, you need to make sure those hard drives are wiped before you get rid of them, because someone could come up on that later, or if someone's going through your trash or happens to get trash from a landfill or something, or however it ends up, you'd be surprised. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about the peace of mind and feeling empowered to do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. So those are a few tools to just do the different things you might be looking to do. I will say, so now we'll get into more, jump up on the levels of tools that we're using here into more functional kind of tool, not an operating system or a methodology for encryption, but so I like Proton Mail. I think it's one of the best email providers to go through. They're really dedicated to privacy and kind of supporting advocacy and activism and all that kind of stuff. So really, I think they're pretty trustworthy. It's free. They have a service where, so if you get their email, it should be pretty secure. And then they also have another service where, for free, where they'll scramble your email when you use it online. So they'll give you a fake email address to use online, and then that email address goes to their servers, and then they descramble the email address. They send it back to your real email address, so that all the spam that you get, so you won't get the spam. And then so those alternate and those change. Those email addresses change every time you use them. So that you can use that to just avoid the whole spam component, which then people use spam to try to get your other information and try to phish you and all kinds of stuff like that. So that is another helpful tool. As we go further along, the more helpful tools you get, or keep everything simple, keep it easy, it all equals less stress in our lives. So Proton Mail also offers a free VPN. So a VPN does something similar to the Tails Tor. Is it bounces you through either a single server or multiple servers before exchanging your IP address with the internet sites that you go to. So it's essentially concealing your IP and your MAC address, so that the sites that you interact with won't know who you are or where you're coming from. So if you use Tails and use the Tor, that's great. Some of these things can be restrictive or prohibitive, like if a certain site is trying to actively to gather your information, they'll actually decline access to the site if you're going through a Tor, that you may run into that. The same thing could be true for a VPN, depends, right? And a VPN may work better than the Tails Tor. So again, depending on the level of sensitivity you have, like if you're like, I'm just talking to people online, I'm not giving out my personal information, I've kind of cleaned things up to where people don't have direct access to me or direct access to my information, but I want to work out of my home. I just simply want to conceal my IP address. Then maybe just use a VPN, so people won't know where, or the sites won't track where you're at. They won't have direct access to that. So subsequently, people that are trying to find out who you are, they won't have that trail of your home address. Say you're posting on a website about a doctor that harmed you, or the treatments that harmed you, and you want to speak directly about the manufacturer or the doctor, again, honestly, you can use a VPN. So if they subpoena the court and they're like, hey, we need to find out who this person is, the VPN's can conceal your identity superficially, right? So if they can find out what VPN you're using, they can then go to that VPN company and subpoena your information from them. Again, it's creating more legwork for them, more difficulty for them, but they could do that and get back to you. If you use a purchased VPN that has the footprint of your payment method and all your personal information. Proton Mail is a free VPN, so you can use different identifying information to get that VPN, and then it will allow you to negate that step. So the only thing about that is Proton Mail, I don't know if they operate outside of U.S. jurisdiction. But they may be able to acquire your actual IP address through the VPN if they could subpoena Proton Mail. I think Proton Mail is a Swiss company, or at least their base of operations is out of Switzerland. If that's true, then that's not a concern. They keep your information private, again, unless you have a 3-letter organization or a governmental office coming after you, which we should be avoiding. But in that case, I don't know, it's ridiculous. No one should be doing that. But in that case, even Tors would be, you'd have to make sure you're going through an internet cafe and using a Tor, and then also concealing your physical identity from the security cameras there in that case. But Proton might not be as safe in that situation. No idea who's listening to this, but so virtually the Proton Mail VPN is virtually fine for anything you'd be doing stateside. There's really no way it would come back to you. But again, you have to ask yourself, what are you doing? How dangerous is it? How sure do you need to be that people can't get back to you? If you need to be reasonably sure that no one can get back to you, Proton Mail VPN is totally fine, and you can exchange mail there. So Google Voice, you can get phone numbers. I haven't dabbled a lot with phone, but you can get phone numbers there. You can get them assigned to you. They're digital, so you can make digital calls, incoming, outgoing. You can send texts. You can do all kinds of stuff with Google Voice as well, so that you can use that to additionally backstop your identity. You can make a phone number associated with identity online. Now, if you need to go to the extent and actually pay for services or pay for things with this identity, again, check the legality, make sure you're operating legally. But most times you can go get prepaid cards. You go get a prepaid cash card, put cash on it when you buy it, and then you can also, if you can use cash payment, use cash payments. These things can't be traced back to you as long as you're smart and you use the VPN and stuff when you're doing it. So the other thing you can do is you can get a prepaid cell phone. You can pay for it with cash or a prepaid card, and they'll you can get ones just out of the box that you could use if you need to have a cell phone and make calls. Remember, everything that's coming off a cell phone is traceable. It goes through a private network. So those private network carriers, Verizon, Sprint, whoever, they can record your calls. They will capture your data and hold it for at least 7 years. So texts that you're sending to and from people, they're going to have the numbers and the text information that's associated with that. So any information you're sending back and forth there is definitely available via subpoena. There are a lot of other ways to get that information as well. So the one thing you have to think about even if you're sending encrypted messages, is the device that is sending the information or the device that is receiving the information. If that's captured or compromised, then you're going to lose, whatever information is there, you're going to lose that information. It's going to be held against you, say if that's in a courtroom or by someone that's trying to find you. You got to think about your endpoints as well, because encryption will help the transmission of data, but if someone has the code to decrypt the information, then you're compromised. So think about that when you're doing stuff. That being said, you can get a prepaid cell phone if you want to be mobile and make phone calls and be able to be contacted and stuff like that. Perfectly fine. There's no issues with that. Last time, you don't have to give up any identifying information, but you can have address, phone numbers, emails, addresses, names that you can use for that stuff if you need to make a payment and procure a cell phone as well. So it just depends. Remember, so that will go into some more tips that I have for you. We'll go into the physical security side of things in a moment here. But that really sums up, I think, the most critical pieces of information for operating online and making sure you're safe and people don't have access to your information. It's really unfortunate, but people are at a severe disadvantage. I don't think people understand really very well how much of a disadvantage you're at interacting online. Like, your information is shared superfluously. Like, online, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's everywhere. It's supposed to be safe and secure. It's not at all. Like, it's pushed around. Anyone that's motivated can find your information. That's why it's important. So as individuals, right, all of our information is out there for people to find if they know who we are. It's that simple. I don't think anyone's identity is concealed any longer, really. It's just not. So, your best bet is to segregate your real identity with an identity that you have online so that people can associate the two. Once you have a segregated identity, once you have a handle online that you're using, now you have this safe platform that you can use to communicate and do what you need to do online without any concerns about blowback, lashback, or unfair litigation being leveraged against you. So, one last little piece of information that may be helpful is that our communications are also tracked, being like our emails, anything we put on Facebook, Twitter, wherever, right? Like there's this record that's kept when the information is exchanged across platforms or is saved on a platform. So if you need to communicate with someone online, but you don't want a record of it being exchanged through servers and transmitted, is you guys can share an email account. So create a Proton Mail and then bring up a draft of an email, type what you need to type, save the draft. That person can go in and access the same email account. They can respond within that draft and then save the draft again, then you can respond. So that's kind of this clandestine way of communicating if you need to communicate or share files with someone across the net to where the information isn't getting exchanged across different organizations or private groups, right? That becomes the problem. Just like your information being traded, your emails are exchanged as well. They cross different servers while they traverse the internet and end up at one provider to another provider. So you want to avoid that. It can be intercepted at any point in between. That was something I remembered. I just wanted to throw out there to folks, depending on what you're doing. So that being said, we'll move over a little bit more into some planning and some physical security. So with physical security, like if you're going to meet somebody you've never met before face to face, maybe you're going to an event, all kinds of different reasons. You could be physically, leaving your home and leaving, cyber communication, virtual communication, and going to a physical location. When you do that, there are these kind of principles of planning that you want to follow that I'll go into. I'll just go over the planning stuff now. There's different planning methodologies you can use. Like if you're a project manager or no one, there's some different methodologies they use. It's really the same thing. You want to prep and find a methodical way of thinking through what you're about to do. And if you're planning on doing something significant, say you're traveling a far distance to meet someone or attend an event and traveling back, there's a lot of steps that are involved. You might want to get out a pen and paper. You may want to bring other people in that know things about where you're going or what type of activities you're going to be engaging in, so you can get their opinion on your plan and how to execute that, and or get advice on how to handle certain situations. What if this happens? What if that happens, right? So if you're making any kind of significant plan, usually you can make a PACE plan. You want a primary plan, an alternate plan, a contingency plan, and an emergency plan. In some areas, that's a communication plan, right? Like you have a primary form of communication, you have an alternate, and then you have a contingency and an emergency plan for communicating if you're working with other people, right? But this can also go into planning as well. You can have a primary plan, like this is what I plan on doing if everything goes well, right? You have an alternate plan, so for some reason the first plan isn't going to work, you make a second plan, right? Your alternate plan. Then you have a contingency plan, and that's like a failover plan, right? Like if everything's just getting screwed up, you have this contingency plan where, like, if all else fails, we'll meet up here, or I'm just going to go home. This is how I'm going to manage to go home, get back to a safe location. And then there's an emergency plan. So what if you're injured? What if you're harmed? Where are emergency services? How are you going to get to a hospital? What methods are you going to use? What's safe? What's not safe? You can address all these things by going through this PACE plan and make these 4 different levels of planning. And if you do this ahead of time, what it'll do is it'll alleviate the stress of doing things you're unfamiliar with or that you haven't done before, right? And I know for myself, like, my stress and my kind of neurological state is bad enough as it is, but if I make a PACE plan for whatever I'm doing, or at least some form of it, then it relieves a lot of stress, right? So, if this happens, if that happens, if all these different things happen, like, I still have a plan, something I can just, if I'm kind of out of my mind, stressed out or whatever, or someone's hurt, I can just follow the plan. I don't have to worry about it. And if you've done sufficient planning, that's really what it's for. It relieves worry. It relieves the need for making calculations and decisions on the fly so that your emotions don't end up landing you in a bad spot, or you're not subjected to additional risk when you're doing something. There's also a STAR kind of planning where you look at the situation. What's the situation, where you're going or what you're trying to do. Break it down into tasks. What tasks can you do? What are going to be the actions that you're going to take on these tasks? And then what do you see the results being, or what are your expected results or your desired results? You can kind of pick what works for you. But the point is that you should be thinking before you do things, right? Even if you're engaging in online activity, you need to think first. What are you doing? What information are you going to share? Who are you going to share it with? How do you want it to appear? Okay. And then how's it actually going to go down? How's it actually going to work out? What are the possibilities? And then what are the repercussions for what's going to happen? What are the possible downsides? What are the possible upsides? Where do you want to land in there? And how do you want to hedge your bet in your activities so that it ends up in the best scenario possible? You can scale this down, right? It can be for small things. It can also be for really, really big things. One thing that I'm hoping for is that maybe someday just people in the community get together and we start planning a little bit more. We start working together a little bit more to achieve like pronounced goals that will have a bigger effect and impact on what's going on out there. If we want to be successful at litigation, we're going to need to have a much more organized effort between all of us in order to leverage a situation where we can make litigation work, because these one-offs are not working for us. Making political change, same thing. Political machine that's out there. I've talked to senators, I've talked to representatives, local, like different ones. I mean, not a whole lot. Politics really unnerving to me, but it doesn't work. Like these people, unless you're going to get them elected, they have no interest in helping you out. I mean, you could tell a senator straight to his face that people are being tortured and murdered every day by ECT, and this is a barbaric, like, medieval thing that's still going on right now, and it's affecting millions, and he don't care. That is literally something that happened to me. So it's going to take a lot more effort and influence in a very concerted way for us to get this stuff done. But the tools, the skills, and the determination are out there. It just takes cooperation. The people that are hurting us and working against us are motivated by greed and money. They're getting a paycheck at the end of the day. We're going to have to overcome that kind of determination if we're going to be successful. I digress again, but that's kind of a part of what this podcast is for, giving us tools and ideas that we can think about and then make a decision, come together, and start working towards something that's going to help everybody. So those are a few kind of methods of planning that you could take away and look at. If you're meeting in person, if you're not used to thinking through things, which most of us aren't, I can tell you a lot of the stuff that I do, I don't think through at first because it's familiar to me, but I should do more thinking. But I can tell you when certain red flags go up for me, I start thinking real clearly, real quickly, right? If someone's like, hey, you want to go meet me here? And I've never been there before, I automatically get anxious. I didn't used to get this way before. Like, I just go places, have fun and whatever. But I started thinking differently. about stuff, and I started planning and doing some legwork, some advanced work before I did stuff. So what I do is, if I can, I go to that location before I meet someone there, and maybe if you're getting food, have food there. If you're doing an activity, just check it out. If you're going bowling or something, go bowling, bowl a game, and then leave, right? But once you've been there, it's not new to you anymore, right? You know the resources that are there. Like, again, a little bit weird. Do I gotta have water and be hydrated? If I don't have any nutrients, if I don't have any water, if I don't have access to this stuff, like things go sideways for me really, really, really quickly. So I can't have that anymore. So I have to make sure it's available there, or I have to bring it. So I can check that stuff out. Is that stuff there? What kind of facilities are available? Where are the exits? If I'm feeling trapped or stuffed in and I need to get out, am I going to be able to get out? And is there going to be hoops or bottlenecks that I have to get through in order to get out of a place, right? These are important facts to me. Can I take water in there? Do I have the ability to hydrate myself when I'm in there, or are they going to be like, no, you can't bring anything in here, right? Like if I'm going through an airport or whatever, right? They have really serious restrictions about what you can and can't do in there, and what you can bring in. So you want to be thinking about how you get into a place, how you can get out of a place, what's available in there, what kind of people are there, what's the mentality there? Are people going to be helpful there, or are they going to be destructive? Are they going to be loud and obnoxious? Is there a lot of light in there? Are you going to be overstimulated in there? These are all things you can figure out before you go into a place. So you need to be looking at, what are my weaknesses, right? Like if I have, if bright lights tend to give me seizures, right? Like you got to be thinking, am I going to go in there? Am I going to do this? Are there bright lights there? What am I going to do if I have a seizure here? Am I going to have the resources to keep myself alive and keep others alive if I'm going here? All kinds of stuff could happen. So, depending on the seriousness of what you're doing and your familiarity, you may or may not feel the need to think through this stuff. But if you need to, you can. The tools are there. Start thinking of things in layers, like what do I need as a baseline to be successful and to have a good time doing this and to relax, right? Make sure you got water, you got food, you got whatever. I need to make sure there's not, blinding lights and loud music. Okay, check, right? When I'm there, if something unexpected happens, am I going to be able to get out? Am I going to be able to get some air? I can't stand being in stuffy places anymore. So I need to, if I can get out and get some fresh air, I can kind of reset, go back in, do whatever I need, and then be okay, right? But if it's stuffy and I start, not feeling right, I can't stay. I have to go, right? I can push it, but it gets kind of unpleasant for everybody if I'm not doing well. I get really edgy and, it just sucks. So those are some things to think about when you're meeting people physically in locations. If you're doing different kind of stuff, like say if you're meeting with a journalist or lawyer or whatever, and you're uncertain about who you're meeting and what their intentions might be, then it's even more important that you know where the exits are, you know what's in and around the area, the kind of people that are going to be there. Don't ever meet someone that you don't know in a private place. Always make sure it's in public, make sure it's well trafficked, make sure that the people that are going to be around you are impartial, right? Like, don't go meet someone at their favorite dive bar that you don't know, right? Because then the crowd there is going to be more likely to be hostile towards you and sympathetic towards them. That kind of stuff. Just think through that stuff. Think about transportation. How are you going to get there? How are you going to leave? Can you drive? Are you getting a ride? Where's your ride going to be? Are you going to have access to them the whole time if you need to leave early? All this kind of stuff. Think it through ahead of time. Think about logistics. Think about, the fundamentals or functionally how things will work. One piece leads to another. Make sure there's no gaps in what's going on. Yeah, you don't have to be like, this isn't about control or,
trying to control every little detail of the situation. This is about being aware of what you're doing, putting yourself at peace of mind, and allowing, good things to occur instead of allowing for potentially bad things to occur, right? If you're interested in this subject matter, there's an author that I like called Gavin de Becker. He had an episode on Joe Rogan, and he also wrote this book called The Gift of Fear. It talks about kind of how our instincts work and how they give us the edge that we need if we listen to our gut and surviving situations that are difficult and dangerous, and kind of gives narratives of things that have happened in the past and the way to leverage things going forward to keep ourselves safe. A lot of us just don't think about this stuff. I was raised to think about this stuff, so I do, and I just wanted to share it with the community so they have the resources and the abilities to do what they need to do instead of feeling disempowered or disabled from doing things that they might want to do or that they need to do. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover, or the big pieces that I wanted to cover. Of course, anyone that has specific concerns or they want to bounce ideas off me or whatever, I'm always free to do that. So try to reach out. I got the website. I got all the resources you guys should be familiar with. That being said, all this stuff is meant for us to be enabled to kind of change our mindsets into like kind of this healthy existence, right? We're all taught like, do this, do that, you need to do this, you need to do that, worry about this, worry about that. A lot of it's just noise and rubbish that really puts us in a bad place to begin with, where we don't have a lot of things working for us. We want to change that. We want to get into a position where we're thinking about ourselves, thinking about good stuff, thinking about positive stuff, having the control to go the direction that we want to, having the ability to exercise our free will and make decisions in the way that we want to, and kind of breaking free of all the things that are holding us back in one way or another. And I think the biggest way to do that is to change our perspective. We have this general voice in our head, this perspective that's kept us back and probably contributed to our injuries and different things. And I think it's a really slow process, but it's an incredibly valuable process of working our way out of those old toxic ways of thinking, working our way out of the trauma, and start thinking in a really healthy way. For everyone, that could be different. For me, it's making choices again based on what I want to do. But you have to realize that you have a choice. You have to realize there's all these variables and all these factors going on, and I don't have to fall into the same old patterns and habits. I don't have to do things I don't want to do. I can do things that I don't want to do. I can do things that I want to do. But I will make the choice based on the information that I have. I'll get the information that I need, and I'll do everything that I need to do to put myself in the best possible position, whatever that may be, right? So that's what I'm getting at here. All the information that I have, I've gotten and gathered on my own based on the desire to know more and to put myself in a better situation going forward. It just shows that you can do anything. Anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. It just takes some direction and some energy and free will, right? You have to believe that you can do this stuff. You have to believe that you can find it, and you have to believe that you can make a difference. Once you get over those hurdles and defy the voices that have been telling us that we can't do this stuff, that we're stuck, we can't make a difference, we don't have free will, we need to do what everyone tells us to do. Once we break away from that stuff and we start living our life, the way I think we were meant, like with the intent to do what we want to do and do what's right, then it's a game changer. I think it changes us neurologically, psychologically, physiologically. There's changes that take place in our body. It's more responsive to ourself and our environment, and it just improves our quality of life. It improves our ability to heal, and help people. But just all kinds of good stuff starts taking place. It's when you're thinking a certain way, it's really hard to imagine thinking any other way. But it's out there. It just takes effort. We got to bring all this stuff into the forefront of our mind, identify it, and then change it and move on. So if you listened to all that, it was long. Thank you very, very much for listening. I hope this sets you up for success in the future, and I hope you're hanging in there. So thanks. Have a good day. Take care.